Hey guys, Cliff Gray here with Flat Tops Wilderness Guides and True Hunts. I've put together this short two-part series on practical marksmanship for the mountain hunter. This first part of the series, I'm going to explain my theory on the difference between flat range marksmanship and grouping versus field/reality marksmanship and grouping, okay? I'm going to emphasize the latter, and I'm going to explain how I think you can improve that part of your marksmanship. In terms of the hunting environment, that's what matters, okay? What you actually group in the field, on field rests, in the environment that you're actually going to be shooting big game in is much more important than what you're going to shoot at the range in a controlled, flat environment. The second part of this series, I will show you some hands-on ways I practice in the field, okay, and in an angled environment, okay? So that's a more hands-on section that I think once you kind of understand where I'm going with this will be very helpful for you in terms of actually training. All right, guys, so over the years, I've guided many hunters across, different spectrums of experience, but overall, all the guys, when you talk to them about what they're shooting at the range, they're all shooting between 3/4 inch to 1.5 inch groups at 100 yards, okay? So 3/4 MOA to 1.5 MOA, all right, in those flat range conditions. However, the thing that's interesting is when I look at all the shot opportunities that I've seen over the years, I can back out what these hunters are actually shooting in the field in terms of groupings, okay? So let's just take a quick mathematical example. Let's assume that on western big game animals, the vital area, and when I say vital area, I mean the section of the animal that if you hit the animal with a big game caliber, the animal is as good as dead, okay? Let's call that an 8-inch diameter section on western big game. The reality is on mule deer it's probably slightly larger than that. On elk it surely is. It's probably 12 to 13 inches, okay? But I'm gonna be conservative and say that it's 8 inches, all right? If guys were shooting the same, 3/4 MOA to 1.5 MOA group that they're shooting in the range, if they were shooting that in the field, 100% of them would hit that 8-inch vital section on animals in the field, okay? Because at 350 yards, they'd still be shooting like a, depending on their range accuracy in that gap that I just mentioned, they're gonna be shooting between 3 and 4.5 inch groups, okay? So an 8-inch vital section should be no problem, all right? But what I find is the reality is and I'm talking probably in the hundreds of times I've seen these shots around 300, 350 yards, hunters in the field are only hitting that 8-inch vital section about 30 to 35% of the time, okay? If we do a little math, what we're gonna find is if we're only having about a third perfect shots and hits at 350 yards, it means that all those hunters as a group at 350 yards are actually grouping around 13.5 inches, okay? And how I got to that is basically you can figure out the area, the area of an 8-inch vital section, okay? And then you can figure out a bigger grouping, all right, that's going to make it so that 8-inch circle, let's call it, the area of that is about 1/3 of your larger grouping, the actual grouping that guys are shooting, okay? And you're gonna get it right in there, basically 13.5 inches. If you back out MOA from 13.5 inch group at 350 yards, you're gonna end up with like a 3.85 MOA group, okay? So 3.85 inch group at 100 yards, okay? So you can see that's substantially worse than what guys are getting in range conditions, all right? So now that I've said that, I'm sure a lot of you are thinking, well, that's not me, okay? That's not me. This guy must guide just shitty marksmen. That has to be the explanation. Guys, I guide a lot of guys that have a ton of mountain experience, okay? And they still fall into this category, all right? And if you are doing 90 to 95% of your shooting in a flat range environment, okay, even if you're trying to use some rest in that environment, you're doing some prone shooting, you're shooting on your pack, if you're still only shooting in a controlled flat environment, I can almost guarantee that you're fooling yourself with that range grouping of 1 MOA. Almost certainly at the higher yardage and in the field and in field conditions, you're probably grouping somewhere between 3 to 5 MOA, okay? So 3 to 5 inch groups at 100 yards. That's most likely what your true field grouping is, okay? So why is there this big difference? Okay, first, field grouping, there's a lot of things going on, all right? Like guys are using rests that they don't use at the range, all right? They could be exhausted from a stock, so they're not dealing with that. And they also usually don't have a lot of experience with the wind in the mountains, okay? So when you factor all that in, that's what widens your group so much in the field conditions, okay? So let's talk about the positive aspects of this, all right? One, it's actually fairly difficult to get a 1 inch group in the flat range down to like a 1/2 inch group, okay? You're gonna have to have specialized equipment, you're gonna have to spend a lot of money on it, get deep into reloading, all those items. And if you wanna do that, that's fine, okay? You can get some gains there. However, your field grouping, you know, your actual hunting grouping, it's actually a lot easier to tighten that group up, okay? One, you're starting at a lot higher grouping, right? A 3 to 4 inch group, you know, or even worse, a 3 to 5 inch group. If you can get that down to a 2 inch group, you've made massive gains, okay? So that's the positive thing. And the reality is it's usually not your equipment that's a problem. You can focus on technique and your personal training and you can bridge that gap. That's where your bang for your buck is gonna be in terms of improving your marksmanship as it relates to actual hunting scenarios, okay? So that's a huge positive in my mind, all right? All you gotta do is practice and focus on the right things. And the nice thing about it is if you're a 2 MOA shooter, in today's day and age, you can buy, you know, with less than $1,000, you can buy a rifle and an optic and you can be shooting in a 1 MOA group at the range or a 1.25 MOA group at the range pretty consistently and easily. So people generally are gonna laugh at a 2 MOA group. However, in the field conditions, in the hunting conditions, that's all you need to be a very, very proficient hunter. If you shoot a 2 MOA group, that means at 400 yards, you're shooting an 8 inch group. That means on almost all Western big game animals, you're killing them close to every time in a consistent, ethical manner, okay? In 400 to 450 yards, maybe 500 yards, that's gonna encompass 98% of your shot opportunities on Western big game, okay? So all you gotta do is achieve 2 MOA and all of a sudden you've gone from just your average Joe Blow hunter out there to somebody who is an assassin up in the mountains, okay? And let's just explain that a little bit further with math, okay? So 400 yards, 8 inch group for a 2 MOA shooter, perfect, you're gonna hit them every time. At 450 yards, all right, you're still gonna hit that 8 inch vital section 82 to 85% of the time, okay? And then at 500 yards, you're still gonna be pretty consistent within that 8 inch vital group of close to 75% of the time, all right? So you can see with those numbers, you're gonna be very, very proficient if you achieve a 2 inch group at 100 yards in field conditions. All right, guys, so overarching theory, why does this exist? Okay, there's guys that'll spend thousands of dollars, in the teens of thousands of dollars that I've guided, and then we get set up on an animal, and I immediately can tell that they haven't shot at all in an angled environment. Okay, they don't know their rests, all those sort of things, and it always is flabbergasting to me. But I've come to realize and understand it's just a function of our society today, right? A lot of guys, it's very hard for them to go out and get in an angled environment, use their rest, use their equipment in true field conditions to get practice, okay? So that's why that occurs. And so some overarching suggestions I'll give you. One, going out and taking a long range shooting class, I think everybody should go do it. Ward Bryan has a great class that I've taken a couple times. He's a great guy, and he covers two topics that I think are really important for mountain hunting, right? Wind, and then shooting in the angled environment, all right? Okay, so go take Ward's class or go take somebody else's class, but make sure that it fulfills those two subject matters, okay? If it's a long range course and it's on a flat range, I mean, you might get something out of it, but in terms of, you know, how it applies to true mountain hunting scenarios, you really need to have the wind in the mountains and shooting in the angled environment. That needs to be a big component of the course, okay? The other thing that I'll suggest is it's hard for a lot of people. I mean, basically 3/4 of this country, you're not going to have easy access to mountainous terrain, right? So for me, it's easy enough to say, go practice this all the time, because I can just go up in the mountains and shoot rocks or whatever, right? Okay, so, but if you're not that lucky, what I would suggest is on all your hunts, okay? So I'll give you an example. Let's say you're going to go to Wyoming, you're going on an antelope hunt, right? The reality is most antelope hunts last 2 or 3 days, okay? If there's a fairly decent population of antelope in the unit that you're hunting, you're going to be done in 2 or 3 days, all right? So what I suggest is when you go out west, you go to Wyoming on a hunt like an antelope hunt, bring a box of 20 shells, okay? And don't leave that hunt until you've shot all of them, okay? So what I mean by that is if you harvest an antelope on the first day, okay, spend the next day, you know, go out of the plains, get out of that antelope country a little bit, might be a 30-minute drive or something, get into the foothills a little bit, get on some BLM that has some topography, and just go out there and shoot in the angled environment, okay? Shoot all 20 of those rounds that you brought with you. If you do that on every hunt, you'll find that you gain a ton of experience, okay, in the environment. I think a lot of people have this mindset that it's like, well, I've got to do as many hunts as I can, right? And I need to maximize that because that's the only way to get experience. That's not actually true, you know. Rocks are free. Rocks are open season year-round, okay, on thousands and thousands of BLM acreage and Forest Service acreage. Just acreage. Just go out and find somewhere that's safe, you're not bothering other people, and you can get that practice in, okay? So you can do that on all those hunts that you go on, even if it's a guided deal. After the hunt's over, just say, hey, I mean, is there a place that I can go for 45 minutes and do some shooting? You know, can you point me to some nearby BLM if you don't want me to do it on your private property? Almost anybody will do that for you. And that means every time you go on a hunt, you're getting a ton of experience, right? Okay? I mean, even PETA doesn't care if you shoot rocks, right? So go out there and do that, and you're going to massively gain experience, okay? And then the next level of that is, if you can, try to go do kind of some cull type of hunts, right? Some pig hunts, if there's some areas where you can go and you can hunt aoudad, you can hunt a ram, and then you can go out and hunt a couple ewes. Stuff like that is going to be very helpful to you, all right? And it's not going to be super costly, and there's opportunities for that. So that's kind of a next level. It's a little bit better, obviously, than rocks, and it's a way to get a little more repetition in. Honestly, it's not that much better, okay? Particularly when you're at the beginning stage where you can make a massive amount of bump up in your field group accuracy. But the other thing is, outside of just we'll get into the mechanics, but the thing that you're going to have to work on a little bit is wind, okay? So wind, if you think about it, it's pretty significant even at the ranges that I told you. So just for instance, like all the reloads that I do in the calibers that I use personally, and also let hunters borrow at those big game calibers, you know, in that 300 to 500 yard range, a 10-mile-an-hour wind is significant, right? It can be, if it's perfectly crosswind, it can be from, you know, it can give you a 4-inch difference of point of impact, and at the longer ranges up there around 500, so it can get you, you know, well beyond 12, 18 inches of shift in impact, okay? So that's something that you're probably not going to get if you're mainly a range shooter. You've got to go practice that, and it goes along with the other stuff. You're just going to have to get in an environment where you can do that and practice it. That is something that's very handy to learn from somebody that knows what they're doing. You might have to just focus on a course for that, okay?